Welcome to episode 25 of the Lone Hockey Podcast, where today we're going to be talking about diagonal neutral zone play. So, we've talked about neutral zone playmaking and the importance of neutral zone playmaking. We've also talked the importance of exits and entries when it comes to neutral zone play, offensive zone play, and defensive zone play as well. So, when talking about diagonal neutral zone plays, you really get into the specifics of lateral playmaking inside the neutral zone. And there's a lot of importance and a lot of emphasis when it comes to making plays diagonally in the neutral zone to be able to get off the wall, get into space, and activate off the center red line into interior space, and also being able to attack through that dot lane on an angle and being able to attack laterally through the dot lane as well. So being able to attack on slants is something that's really underrated when it comes to diagonal neutral zone plays and being able to understand the fundamentals that go into attacking on slants. So when you're attacking on slants, ideally it's as a puck carrier. You want to be attacking in a certain way where you have leverage with your feet, your body positioning to be able to have that slant element and slant dynamic to your puck skills. So that way as a player, if you're able to weight shift or if you're able to instinctually find the middle of the ice, it's much easier when you have body position, you have your feet angled in a specific way, and you're able to understand processing speed elements that go into the situation as well. So, in talking about diagonal neutral zone play specifically, you want to really get into depths of the lateral playmaking and how to find interior space. So with finding interior space and being able to get off the wall, activate off the center red line, we've mentioned multiple times how activating off that center line, especially in the neutral zone, trying to get off the wall is so difficult for players because there's closure from the forecheckers, there's closure from the D, trying to surf guys off and angle guys off. And there's much more collapse play inside the neutral zone because teams are looking to prevent exit or prevent entries and look to kill those plays along the blue line as well. So in talking about these sequences specifically, being able to attack on slants, being able to attack in a diagonal and attack in ways that gives favor to the attacking team and the attacking player is really important when we talk about diagonal neutral zone play specifically. And also being able to attack through the dot. So being able to attack on a slant through the dot, specifically speaking. Being able to attack on slants through the dot area is so important. And again, to getting off the wall, but also being able to understand how to leverage D1 and D2, especially that strong side defenseman in that scenario, because that strong side defenseman is going to look to seal the middle of the ice, but there's a sequence that leads up to where the player attacks on a diagonal through the dot lane. That's going to open up some space, and the D is going to be forced to move, forced to shift. That weak side D is going to have to either retreat to the middle or he's going to have to look towards the weak side, see if there's a line rush, and see what numbers are coming in the other way in waves as well. So, in talking about the importance of being able to attack on slants through the dot lane area is so important, so vital to a team's success and how they're able to generate and how they're able to create lateral playmaking elements inside the neutral zone as well. And with that, another big thing is being able to change of sides possession and utilize change of sides possession when it comes to neutral zone playmaking. And this is something I've actually studied firsthand in the past, where I studied lane switch data and I was studying the importance of it because there's obviously three lanes in the neutral zone. You have the two outside lanes, which I would label as one left outside lane, one right outside lane, and then obviously you have the center lane, right? So those three lanes make up the neutral zone play, and the middle lane being in between the dots as a divider type scenario if you're dividing the neutral zone by width of the ice. So the importance of lane switches is that it can incorporate change of sides possession, especially if you're going from one of the outside lanes or passing or carrying to the middle of the ice, or if you're changing sides of possession with an outside to outside lane switch. And this only happens through passing. It doesn't happen to carries because you can't obviously carry the puck from one lane to the other outside lane. That's impossible. So for players who are able to do that, a outside to outside lane switch, when timed effectively and when it can lead a teammate into space, is actually really underrated way to change the side's possession. Stretches the forecheck out, stretches D1 and D2 to really isolate themselves to be more of one-on-one threat. And it changes the whole landscape of the neutral zone. It widens the neutral zone for the offensive attacking team. So that way there's more structure and there's more dynamic in how they're able to attack. Because if the strong side, say, is clogged up and there's players overloading that side in terms of defensive pressure in the neutral zone, Kansas side's possession can be an outlet way to try and get around that and try to create more space and try to create an entry situation out of that, controlled entry specifically. So being able to use change of sides possession is so underrated in that sense, and being able to utilize it consistently is very underrated in that sense as well. And you want to consistently make sure that there's change of sides possession elements, especially on passes when defensive structure is clogging up the strong side of the ice. But it's a really good outlet in general, just to be able to extend possession, try to potentially even activate the defenseman, activate the weak side defenseman. So it can incorporate a lot of different elements into the style of offense that a team can create inside the neutral zone and how they're able to create that moving forward as well. And transition threat is a big component when talking about neutral zone play in general. We know that, and how important it is to transition pucks with speed, with pace, with ability to drive possession and be play drivers. So there's a lot of different elements that intertwine with each other in talking about neutral zone play and the importance of diagonal attacking. And diagonal attacking, it can also be executed through the middle lane as well. So there's some really good middle lane drivers, mid lane playmakers, mid lane attackers inside the neutral zone who are really potent in quick strike when it comes to being able to maneuver east west, yet also still maintaining that ability to maintain center ice. So we mentioned Patrick Kane is a really good example. He's really good at doing it on the power play where he can maneuver in middle ice and maneuver laterally at the same time, which is really hard to do when you think about it because it's hard to let alone continue possession moving north, but doing it laterally while also maintaining that middle of the ice area is so underrated to do. And Patrick Kane is really good at doing it, and he's done it a lot at 5-on-5 as well, even strength situations. Usually, even strength situations like 3-on-3 and 4-on-4, you'd see that a little bit more often because teams obviously have a little bit more leeway when it comes to how they're able to attack and how they're able to structure their offensive setup and stuff like that. But with the Kane example, it's a really prime example of how he can really utilize his skill, his weight shifting ability, his puck skills to be able to combine these elements inside the neutral zone and his neutral zone playmaking as well. And so there's a lot of different offensive components that go into diagonal neutral zone plays. It can create a better entry scenario for one, because if you're talking about a north entry, okay, it's good if it's a controlled entry, but if the player's moving a straight line route on the entry, what's going to happen after the entry? Is it going to get killed right away, or is something actually going to get generated out of it? And odd times you get something generated out of it. You might get a shot. More likely than not, this player's going to have to try and extend possession by trying to cut back below the goal line or cut back along perimeter space because it's much harder to do, especially when you're outside the dot lanes and in the outside lanes in the neutral zone attacking north on the entry versus if there are players who are able to find that interior space, they're able to process it and they're able to not only attack on a diagonal and have a diagonal entry, but now what happens after the entry is you create optionality on that entry. So you have options. You can kick the puck wide. You can kick the puck out to the other side. You can bump the puck back to the defenseman. You can use a little deceptive or manipulation move, especially if you're in middle ice, to try and beat the defenseman. So you create a lot of optionality and almost a spider web of options around you as a player when you're attacking on slants and being able to attack on slants to not only the neutral zone, but then inside the offensive zone entry as well. So importance of that's really underrated, vastly underrated. And with the emphasis on transition play, neutral zone play, and neutral zone tracking nowadays, there's going to be a lot more data in the future that'll show more plays and more sequences inside the neutral zone specific. It's really cool to actually understand it all because it's not just about entries, it's not just about exits as well. Because another big thing, even on exits, is being able to have a diagonal element attached to it. We talked about how on controlled exits, sometimes it's better to move the puck north. At the same time, if there's less pressure and if it's a neutral zone forecheck where it's say a 1-2-2 and it's slightly passive, where you can push that 1-2-2 back a little bit easier compared to a 2-1-2 where you have heavy pressure from F1 and F2 right away. or compared to a 1-2-2 that's still aggressive with their middle guys, their middle forwards, and their defenseman plays slightly bit higher as well. And that first one, F1 plays a little bit higher and deeper. So you could take advantage of being able to create diagonal exits in terms of playing a more passive forecheck. That's where you can get more leeway in terms of that, where there's less pressure involved because it's obviously risky if you're handling the puck solely in the middle ice on the exit with pressure, because that can create an easy turnover, maybe a breakaway, maybe a 2-on-1, whatever it may be the other way, and it can create it very quickly. So on the exits, especially against a passive 1-2-2 or passive neutral zone forecheck, passive O zone forecheck, using diagonal playmaking can help inside to translate that to the neutral zone. Being able to use a little east-west ability can open up some optionality, especially for defenders who are trying to lead the rush or trying to kick pucks wide to one of the wingers coming underneath the puck with speed, because usually teams have timed routes where they have teams and players swing back and they swing around the boards, especially the wingers still swing around the boards. You see it a lot in the NHL and at so many other levels as well. Swing around the boards and then they'll attack up ice. And then once they get speed underneath the puck, they'll attack that. So I think of Matthew Barzal sometimes as a really good example of that, especially with his weight shifts and how even on exits sometimes where you see him swing underneath and he could be outside the dot lane to start on his exit in the D zone. And then once he gets to the neutral zone area, he can quickly weight shift to try and find interior space. He can quickly maneuver. He can use manipulation. He can use deception with his puck skills. But his hockey sense, he uses hockey sense at such a high pace. It's like a McKinnon, McDavid-esque almost style hockey sense where he can process that information at such high pace. So he can maneuver at such an easy speed and such a seamless speed. So Barzal is a really good example of players able to incorporate diagonal weight shifting style exits and lateral style exits, and he can translate that really well to the neutral zone. He's actually one of the more underrated players in the league when it comes to being able to do that on occasion as well. And there's obviously other players who do it really well, but that's the one example that I really come back to and really think about a lot. And so, in terms of diagonal playmaking in and of itself, there's obviously a lot of elements that go into it, and there's a lot of elements that can really translate from exits to entries.